back, everyone, to Valor Media and the continuation of Dr. George Kelly's stories. And we appreciate everyone who's listened and watched so far. We're going to continue on with the tales of cultural differences and the tales of adventures. Dr. Kelly, would you like to take it from here?
Yes, I've been talking about some of the ministry highlights and different aspects of preparation, a lot of other things about our time in Papua New Guinea and getting there. Now I just got some stories to rather wrap up some things. Though if I could get my adult children, to tell about their view, their experiences growing up in New Guinea, that'd be good too. We'll see. I have one that's in Spain right now, and the other is not far from where I live in Melbourne, Florida. So we'll see. But today, yes, I want to talk about some cultural differences and also a few small tales. And every time I look at my list, it's like, oh yeah, and I think of something else. And that's life, right? Always something else. When you go to a foreign country, you want to be prepared as best as you can, particularly to understand something about the cultural differences. You especially don't want to make any faux pas. That's fancy French for no cultural mistakes. It's so easy to do. And we'll think, well, what was wrong with that we did? And nothing in the US, but in your host culture, it may be highly offensive. So you want to avoid that. There's plenty of books to help you on every country you want to go to as to how to be prepared. But no matter what you learn along the way and from other people, there's always going to be a few things that are unexpected. Offhand, I couldn't think of anything that was a faux pas for us. But the first lesson that we had was like, we thought we were doing the right thing. So here goes the story. So we lived in what was called the Steamship's House for a while. Steamship company owned it. We rented it. And we had a decent sized house and fair sized yard. My wife's always used to do her own housekeeping, own cooking, own yard work. And so there'd be this string of ladies that would come by, nationals, New Guineans, and say, Mrs., would you give me a job? And Laverne would say, no, I do that myself. Now, in the back of our minds, it's like, we don't want to be so important and so appear so rich that we have servants. The missionaries have faced this in the Philippines and other places, Africa, for years. And the culture's changed some, but to some extent, what I'm about to tell you remains true in many cultures to this day. First of all, there's no way that you can get around the fact that you're wealthy compared to most people in the world. So you have to start thinking about how do other people look at you. I remember talking to Doug Lucas, who is and was the head of Team Expansion. And he said, when I travel, I have all these kinds of electronic gadgets, but I don't take them with me. I want to have a small, I don't know if he said footprint, but a small electronic footprint. So people, what do you have there? And how much? When we first went to Ukraine, everybody asked, how much that cost? How much that cost? It wasn't seen as insensitive. Now, say for our culture, you wouldn't say, oh, how much that camera cost? Unless we had good reason to know that the person would love to tell us, or we have a relationship with them. So you think about, all right, well, we're already going to be living in a better house than what most of the nationals live in. But still, you don't want to hire servants. We're not that kind of people. Well, so there was this train of women coming by and men coming by. And then finally there was Rosa. Or was her name Marie? I don't remember. Because you see, when she showed us her resume and her recommendations, that was somebody else's. Yeah, she lied. And so for a while we called her Marie. And then one day she leveled with us. I'm sorry to have to tell you, but I lied to you. I am not really Marie, I'm Rosa. And I still want to work for you. So these are cultural things in the States. You might say, well, that's a deal breaker. But over there, we didn't consider it so. So Rosa told Laverne, it's not right that you don't hire somebody. What do you mean not right? Well, you have money and we don't. you could afford to pay us to do your gardening work or your housework or something. And because you won't, then some of us, we won't have what we need for food or take care of our children. Well, you might say she was rather clever in putting a guilt trip on my wife, but basically it was true. If you have the money and you don't use it to hire somebody to help them out, then you are stingy. In a gay culture, generosity, even if it has strings attached, generosity is extremely important. And greed and stinginess is a terrible sin. That's something else you have to learn. That some things we think are rather small or not even sinful in our culture, some other culture may see it otherwise. Some of our individualism may seem like we're bad guys compared to those who emphasize community. So, Rosa taught us a lesson that you could be considered selfish in your witness for the Lord and have no idea. So you need to talk to locals. How do they see things? How do they feel about things? We knew about one of the cultural signs, particularly in the villages, that you didn't do. But what was really funny, and yet not so funny, was then we had, I withhold his name, but we had this fellow to come over and his wife to work in the IT department and support services for a couple of years. He had a tick. His eyebrows just kept going, up and down, up and down. Well, if you raise your eyebrows toward a woman, you're inviting her to go for a walk with you. And to go for a walk is a euphemism for to go and have sexual relations. So you have to be careful about raising your eyebrows, especially to a person of the opposite sex. One of the interesting things that we found in terms of what villages still had when we were there, 80s, they still had stone implements. Most of them had disappeared, or maybe they were in museums by then. But I spied children playing with a stone, and I thought, that's shaped like it was a tool. I asked some of the older men in the village, and they said, yeah, that was for making sack, for pounding sack. Now we use the same thing, but instead of with the stone, we have a piece of galvanized pipe cut off that goes at the end of our round stick, and that protects it from splintering and breaking so well. So that's better than the stone we had for pounding the sack. Sack is like a flower made out of the pith of a certain palm tree. And they use it extensively, just like Mexicans might use tortillas. So I brought back that tool at stone, and I asked one of the older men, I says, could you make me the handle and the webbing that this thing fits into that you use to beat things with? I said, sure. So I have that today. I also ended up picking up some flint axes from other places and a sharp flint knife. I also have a sharp cassowary bone that it was cut in a certain way to be used as a dagger. I have some other cassowary bones that are used like an owl, AWL, to put a hole into the palm branches that they use to weave for the roofs. So I have some artifacts. I don't really have a good place to show them. My wife Laverne doesn't want me to decorate the walls with all that stuff. So I like to get them out every once in a while to remember what we'd seen. Not only did we find out that there were still some Stone Age tools around, there were still people practicing cannibalism when we were there. One time I read that probably cannibalism died out when the Australians took over New Guinea and established law and order to the extent you can in a country that has over 800 different languages, a history of tribal warfare. So the last we heard for sure was in the 50s, there was still cannibalism. But when we were there then, let's say the late 80s, there were reports of somebody in the highlands who were considered more fierce than people in the lowlands. There was an arm sticking out of a shopping basket. Shopping basket, made out of plaited palm branches or other kinds of leaves. That was reported, quite likely true, but just recently I read that occasionally there is still cannibalism. Now, just kind of aside, I read before going to New Guinea, I read articles and chapters of books about this, and there were those anthropologists that argued that there never was cannibalism because you ask this tribe if they practice cannibalism. Oh no, no, no. But that tribe over there, they practice cannibalism. So everybody's saying that everybody else is doing it. So some anthropologists decided, well, probably nobody's doing it. It's just how they accuse their neighbors of things. But there was some good archaeological evidence and stories to the contrary that it was practiced. Somebody tried to make their doctoral dissertation or their claim to fame on that argument, but it really doesn't hold up water. We tend to forget that every culture is made up of many subcultures. So can we talk about the American culture? Well, foreigners say that they can, and there are books that will describe what is American culture, but we well know there's also Southern culture. There's not just Southern culture, there's Charleston, South Carolina culture. There's Louisiana, New Orleans culture. There's Georgia culture. So forth it goes, Alabama. And then we'd say Southwest has its culture. Northwest, New England, variety of cultures. But we tend to minimize those things because we have this overlay of what we might call American culture. We should not be surprised then that you go to another culture, that there'll be sections of the country that are different. They have different dialects and not different languages. And there are some things that one part of a country might say is the right way to do something. Another part would say, oh, no, those people are so foolish. Well, two illustrations from New Guinea. Those people in the highlands, they don't know how to make houses. That's a lowlander saying. And how does a lowlander make a house? On stilts and on quila stilts. Those are posts of ironwood that will not float, will not rot, and insects will break their teeth on it. So the house, and rivers can flood, and so houses are built up above head high, usually, not always, but high enough you got to use a ladder to get in. By the way they make a ladder, you take a log and you put notches in it for steps. And when the log is leaning against the house, the hut, you can come in. But if the log has been moved either up on the veranda or down on the ground, then those folks aren't at home. They don't want you going into their house. So the Highlanders, because it's colder, they don't want their house on stilts with the wind blowing below it. They want to be near the ground. And just like happens in our cultures in the U.S., sometimes one culture doesn't really want to try to understand things from the other perspective. It's much more fun just to be critical of those folks up there. Then there is, how do you make a dugout canoe? Well, people who live in the lowlands and who live near rivers, they know how to make dugout canoes. Now, when people are in smaller rivers or tributaries, not in the more prestigious areas of the jungle, then they might not make canoes quite straight, cut out quite as neatly. And so some folks from the Sea Peak or the Ramu will say, oh, those folks up the Slocum, they don't know how to make a canoe, that sort of thing. So you have that. Sack that I mentioned. One way of making sack is very common is you mix a little water with that flour, you have your pancake or your tortilla, and then you put bugs in it or leaves in it, whatever else you're going to eat. And it's like a pizza then. Another way is you take sections of bamboo, you cut open the one end so that it can hold water or whatever you want to put in it. And then you put in the flour and you put in the water and whatever else they may put in there, if they're going to add flavorings or bugs or things. And then you mix it up good and you cork it, you close it. And this then becomes, and the Highlanders like it that way, some of them at least, and it becomes maybe something like taffy, very stringy, pulley, except it looks like flour glue. So each one of those cultures say the other people don't know how to make sack. You would think people who eat grub worms would not feel offended about being offered spaghetti. But look at that spaghetti, reminding them of not just worms, but snakes. And so just like we might turn up our mouth or avert our glance towards some of the things they would eat. Same way. We had things that they wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. So every culture views things as the right or wrong from their own perspective. Now, what about clothing? Well, there's one standard for town and another standard out in the villages, though things have changed a lot in the villages from when we lived there. Toplessness was not unusual when we lived there. So what do they consider sexy? The men, for example, thighs. And because of that, women should not wear shorts. Women should not wear jeans. Women should not wear swimming suits. But if they had a wraparound or grass skirt, that was perfectly all right. So our daughter Tiffany, quite the tomboy, she got the bad news that she was going to have to wear her skirt whenever she went swimming. Right. The one exception was if we were at one of the hotels that had a pool that catered to foreigners, then those folks understood that they call this white skins, that a lot of white skins, they think it's all right to dress that way. And as long as it's just there in the confines of that resort, then it's okay. And so that was Tiffany's freedom when she got to go to Smuggler's Inn and go swimming. What about a Miss America contest and this Papua New Guinea contest? What kind of cultural things we run against there? Well, in New Guinean, like for any celebration, the woman is going to really dress what they call bilas, lots of decorations, straw, berries, grass skirt, coconut oil, some kind of red pigment mixed with the coconut oil spread all over, shells, especially some that might make noise. And so however they could decorate themselves, headdresses of different kinds. So there was this calendar of Miss New Guineans, and very beautiful, 12 months, full color. One thing they had in common is they all were topless. And none of them had a bathing suit because the government had decided that whatever compromises we make with the West culturally, we need to have some degree of modesty. And for them, for a woman to wear this bathing suit that showed off the hips so clearly was just like a bridge too far. So that was the culture at the time. Now, things in Port Moresby, the capital city, had a lot of Western influence and things were changing there. Some women might wear slacks or jeans there, and they would never think about it in the other towns, and certainly not in the jungle. So I think that's enough for right now about cultural differences. As you can imagine, there's got to be a lot of them. But these are just the ones that come to my mind. And what about some tale of adventures? Well, living in New Guinea 4.5 years later, then later again, that was an adventure. It was always an adventure. You're in a different place, different culture, different people. You're doing a different thing than you have been doing before. And you're seeing the languages, groups open up the languages. You're seeing people come to Christ. Your transport is by foot, by twin Hilux, Toyota, or Jeep, Suzuki, or by Land Cruiser, or by canoe, motorized or paddled, by small plane, or the Twin Otter. It's got 2 props. I mean, just all like this is, makes things exciting. It made an unusual childhood for our children and influenced their entire future, which I maybe can get them to talk about sometime. So, little adventures. We were in a dugout canoe convoy. I don't remember now, 2 or 3 of the canoes, and they were ocean canoes, so they had outriggers. But we were going sideways to the waves, which had been fine until one wave just a little bit bigger than the other waves made that canoe go, 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 and flipped. My wife is not a swimmer, so that didn't go over well for her. And we were trying to get her back in the canoe, and it wasn't working too well. And I said, well, just hang on and, and they're going to paddle us back to the island where we're going. Well, that was not a good idea. I mean, sharks, no sharks to hang on and be trailing, no. So we managed to get her in. So Tippy Canoe and Tyler too. One of Laverne's little stories. I'm sure she'd love to be telling herself if she could. Now, next story is called 12 Hands Kept Us from Sliding Off the Mountain. 12 hands, that means 6 people. So we were going from the lowlands to the highlands, and we were going around this bend, but the whole mountainside had slipped, a landslide. And we really needed to continue on our way, but there was no level spot. We were going to be at an angle. And there was nothing to do but keep sliding into the jungle. So I didn't think I could attempt it. I was going to have to go back. But a bunch of those beginning guys saw the need and they came over, and there they were, downhill. So if the vehicle slipped, they could be run over by it. And they're holding up the sides of the vehicle while we're making headway forward, and they're keeping us from sliding off of the mountain. So 12 hands kept us from sliding off the mountain. Then there was a time that the oxygen mask dropped. I might have told this story in one of my other episodes. Joel and I were returning from Fort Moresby, the capital, where I'd been teaching in the Bible college for a little while. My wife was in the U.S. getting a parotid tumor removed. And our daughter was out in the village with the Parrish family. So Joel and I were on our way back to Madang, where we live in the North Coast. And he, I kept hearing this sound, this like hissing, like escaping air. And I thought, something's wrong back there in the toilet room. I don't know if this is draining outside and it's stuck or what. And nobody was doing anything about it. Next thing we know, the oxygen masks all drop out from the ceiling. And the plane's full of kids who were at boarding schools in Australia, and they were coming back for a break, for a holiday. And nobody says anything. And I'm figuring that we've lost some cabin pressure because of that hissing and something's escaping in the bathroom. Next thing you know, no announcement, but the plane makes a steep bank. And we're over the Owen Stanley Range, I believe. We're going over mountains, and we have this sudden turn. So, doesn't instill confidence in you, especially when you still have no explanation what's happening. Finally, we're told we're headed back. We figured that out. And we go to land back at Fort Moresby. All of these fire wagons and ambulances are out there waiting for us. So you're like, wow, what's happening? Do we have wheels, or we're going to skid in? We're going to phone the runway? Well, we landed, and sometime later, they provided another plane, and we were on our way. Never heard what the problem was, but I think my guess was probably correct. So, New Guinea, the land of the unexpected. And then there's the time before the volcano blew. Now, that sounds rather sensational, since the volcano didn't blow for some years afterward. After what? Joel and I went over to Rabaul. We went to another island, to another town, which was famous from World War II and from the Japanese occupying it especially. There were still tunnels to be visited that had equipment in it, where they would take, I think even submarines, take them in, put them in the mountain, then send them back out. So we hired a dugout canoe and a couple guys to take us over to the volcano. And we climbed up, and then we climbed down. So we went up to the top of the rim, and then we went down into the bottom. Joel got this really big chunk of, it's made with sulfur, whatever it is, sulfur crystals. And if I remember right, this was when he was on his break between being at Atlantic Christian College and Milligan College, when he was came back to see us during the first part of our second term, I believe. Well, that's beside the point, isn't it? So what brings all that up is we had been taking care of it. We got it by the dugout canoe. We got it back to Rabaul. We got back from there to the mainland, and we were taking him to the airport, and this thing was in the back seat. And I did something, don't remember exactly now. but I made contact with it and it lost a lot of its size. And Laverne was really unhappy with me. Joel had this souvenir and was about to catch his flight to Port Moresby back. It'd be his responsibility to keep it safe. So you wonder, all that care, and then there something like that happens. Well, a few years later, that volcano did what it had done some years earlier. It blew, and it buried the town in ash. So we can say, well, we were there between eruptions. Well, what else shall I tell you? In 3 villages, 3 language groups, I'm considered the big man. A big man is the term for anybody who's a boss. So because I was the boss for Pioneer Bible Translators, Papua New Guinea branch, I was the big man. But to be a really big man, you should get your pig. So I got 3 pigs. I once told the story in one of these episodes about when we were at jungle camp and this wild pig would come around rooting things up and the villagers were trying to get it and hadn't. And I took my army survival knife and lashed it to my walking stick and I speared it and it got it in the side and he ran through the thicket of hibiscus and then shortly after that it came out and the village had to finally track him down. I guess they had a feast. So that was my first pig. Another pig was where we did our village living in Lekon, and we the truth is they had caught that pig, they had trapped it, and they thought it would be good for me to be the one to lance it, to kill it. So no real sport there. But the big event was when I went with guys from another language group, and we were hiking and hiking and hiking. We went through swamps. We did this, we did that. We had dogs with us, and finally they picked up a scent and was chasing this pig, and then it got kind of caught in the thicket. So it was backed up in this thicket. The dogs had it, were snarling at it, and the pig was snarling at the dogs. And I don't remember, it seemed like there were 4 of us, but I think it probably about 6 of us, 8 at the most. And so they told me, it's yours, So, okay, it's my pig. I'm running with the spear that they'd given me, one of their local spears. And people are hollering, and it's all in their language or else in Melanesian pidgin. And I don't quite catch it, but they're telling me to fall back or climb a tree or something, And I realized that suddenly I'm by myself. And but there's the pig. I'm there. And I don't give him a second. I drop to my knee and I'm going to spear that thing right in the heart, And I'm not a pool player, but I understand what you got to learn to do is not follow the arc of your hands, but to keep it going straight like that. Well, I hit that tough hide, and it just bounced off. And I tell you, I see those eyes looking bloodshot and angry, and they're snarling, and so forth. And I think I got to run, and I'm afraid if I run, he's going to get me. The dog's going to hold him, and so it's all split second. I think I've got to go ahead and do this, and I pull back, steel myself, and then I get him. Meanwhile, the guys haven't come yet, and so once I have him in the pins, and he's trying to get away, and I'm holding him, then the guys come, and as their custom is, they whack him with the back of a hatchet on the head a few times. Pigs are tough. Feral pigs are really tough. So my story is about 3 pigs and being a big man, besides by position, but by earning the right. I told you some before that when I left the village living after 45 days, one of the men said, "Oh, George, you shouldn't be going to town. You're not a town person. You're a bush person. You should stay here in the bush with us." And I thought, yeah, I could do that. So, okay. Climbing Mount Wilhelm. Mount Wilhelm is the tallest mountain in Papua New Guinea. I think that New Guinea itself, Irigaray part, formerly known as Dutch New Guinea, has one slightly higher. There's actually a glacier there, or was. And where we climbed to Mount Wilhelm, there was actually some pockets of snow. So Papua New Guinea, just below the equator, snow. Make a long story short, a bunch of teachers had planned to climb Mount Wilhelm. And so we hiked up to like 10,000 feet, spent the night there, got adjusted the next day. And then about midnight, we went and climbed up to Mount Wilhelm. It's under 15,000 feet, but it's about the same size as most of the bigger mountains in the Alps. And we made it to the top. And the idea is to get there when the sun comes up, and you can see both sides of the island and the ocean on both sides if it's clear. And but the idea is to get there to see the sun come up in the ocean from that height. That was quite an adventure. And Joel's sleeping bag got wet. We had to share a sleeping bag, and I'm sure that young teenager will never forget that. All right. I think a bunch of my things come to my mind. I think we better call it there before our time runs out, and maybe a few more stories, maybe another time, tied in with the kids and their schooling and their life in Papua New Guinea. All right. Well, I'm glad that you listened and that it gave me a chance to share some of my life story and to relive some of the blessings that we have had. So until next time, this is George.
God bless everyone. And mind if I do a prayer real quick? Heavenly Father, we just come to your throne of grace, with boldness. Thank you, Jesus, for what you've done for us on the cross. And we pray that you use George's stories to bless the listeners and help them find ways to have practical takeaways that they can apply in their own lives, Lord God. And we thank you again that we can come and share these resources. And thank you for all the listeners, and I pray you bless them. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. God bless.